Hello, everybody. If you're joining us for the webinar on how to solve complex field to office workflows with QuickBooks and Method, you are in the right place. We're just going to give people a few minutes to trickle in. But while that's happening, I'd be curious to know where everybody's joining from. You can let us know in the question box. There should be a little chat window on the side of your screen. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. John, where are you calling in from? I'm out of Toronto. What about yourself?
Do you mean me?
Yeah, you, John. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
sorry.
sorry. I'm John Sandy, and I'm out of just north of Atlanta, a place called Cumming, Georgia.
Love it. And I see people trickling in, so we'll just give it one more minute. It is a live interactive webinar, so feel free to chime in. Maybe folks are shy on this Thursday afternoon or morning, depending on where you're calling in from. I'm just gonna send a chat to everybody, and we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, I see somebody joining from Georgia. That's nice to see. Okay, we're a few minutes in, so we will get started. And we'll start with a quick introduction for those of you who don't know me, and I believe we have some friends of Method in the attendees. But I'm Mattis. I will be your host for today. I spent the past decade working in technology with a huge focus on helping businesses automate different workflows, specifically financial ones and those that connect back to QuickBooks. So think payroll accounts, payable, banking, and many others. And currently, I'm leading content and method and hosting. But I'm much more excited about the fact that we are joined by a special guest today, John Sandy, who is the president of John Sandy and Associates. John's bringing a wealth of experience and expertise in business workflows and field service operations. So he's been in the industry for over 40 years, has supported John, I believe, over 350 Intuit Field Service Management deployments, has
Yep.
numerous method customizations under his belt, and will take us through what some of those look like today. John, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think you did. That sums it up pretty well.
Okay, amazing. A few things on housekeeping before we get started. First up, I want to let everybody know the session is being recorded. So if you have to jump early or anything like that, we will send a recording your way after. And also the webinar is of course live, which means you get to ask us questions. And so as I already mentioned, for those of us joining a little bit later, there's a box in GoToWebinar where you can submit questions to us and we will tackle those live. And we will save most of those towards the end of the webinar. And some of you have already submitted questions to us during registration, so we'll be tackling all of those in the second half as well. Okay, let's talk about our agenda for today. So the first thing that we want to talk about before we dive into all the good stuff with your help, John, is we actually want to level set on what do we mean by a custom QuickBooks CRM and why you might be thinking about something like this. And secondly, we want to take a look at a quick case study of a company called Vintage Makers and the specific workflows that they built to achieve success in their business and what it meant for them to use something like Method. And then John will be taking us through those three workflow scenarios. So that includes work orders, invoicing, and field management, all the good stuff from field to office communication and workflow. And then finally, we'll be tackling those questions. We did get a lot of questions, so excited for that second half. Amazing. So we'll dive right into it with why people should think about a customizable QuickBooks CRM in the first place, which is that's what Method is. In case you're unfamiliar, in case you're exploring us for the first time, Method is QuickBooks CRM that is fully customizable. And there are a couple of things that are important when you think about this. So the first one is, and a lot of business owners have this experience, especially as they're growing, it's that when you want to standardize your systems and you want to move away maybe from paper or spreadsheets or whatever it is that you've been using so far, you sometimes have to contort yourselves a little bit into a one size fits all solution if you've tried those before. I actually just got off a call with a landscaper an hour before this, was telling the Method team about why we chose Method. And it was the fact that as he was trying other systems, he found that he had to actually transform how he did things in order to make his business work for that system, which feels a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. If you're trying to scale an operation that is already working, and you found a way to do things that is already working. So that's the biggest reason. And then the next big one is QuickBooks. And that is if it is your source of truth, and if you want to keep it as a source of truth, but you want to do more than accounting or invoicing or the kind of basics, you will want a system that has a deep integration with the accounting software. The reason for that ultimately is everything you do on the sales and customer side, that should end up being reflected in your accounting. Ultimately, that's how you keep score in business, right? It's what you're going to look at the end of the year. And if your system does not have this integration or it has just a superficial integration, chances are that you're going to be stuck with a lot of manual work trying to tidy things up. And then the final thing I would say, while we're talking about a CRM, which it stands for customer relationship management, as we know, we should really be thinking about workflows as a whole. So it's about managing the relationship that we have with the customer, but really it's not the business as an abstract entity that's managing that relationship. It's actually your team. It's you yourself. It's your office crew. It's your field crew. And what are all the steps that they're taking? What are the different responsibilities that they have to manage as they move through the service that you're providing to your customer? So these are the core things to think about. And then finally, really, is if you're looking for a way to turn your workflows and your operations into an actual competitive edge. And we're going to be looking at that very shortly in the case study. But John, anything to add here before we kind of move on? Feel free to, you know, agree, disagree, poke holes. You've been
No,
doing this
no,
for
yeah.
a long time.
Yeah, no, I think you've laid it out very well. And if I could just add one thing to ease folks maybe a concern is when we talk customization, understand that Method is built on a platform that is has code that is what's called stock or unchangeable codes, the way I like to describe it. And what they allow us to do on this platform is play in the 2% of dirt that lives on top of the code that is controlled by Method. So when we customize, we're not really rewriting the entire code or changing it, and it costs thousands of dollars. It's really kind of a low code, no code type approach where we can make changes very easily and very inexpensively to the design of the screen, to the workflow, as Mattis has brought out here already. And it's not so extensive. So requests can be made and some features can be added in as little as 30 minutes to an hour at a very low cost to accomplish what you're looking for. And that's the only thing that I would just like to add to what you've already said, uh, Mattis, at this point.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective too, because yeah, I think when people hear the word custom or customization, sometimes that can seem scary, but the way that Method is built from the ground up is meant to enable that in a very accessible way. So
Right.
love this overview, John. I'm going to dive into a quick example of a case study just to actually bring some of this to life of one of our customers, and you can find them on the website and read a little bit more about their story. It's a company called Vintage Makers, and what they do is they design, manufacture, and install wine cellars, both for retail and residential operations. And a little bit about the business. They've been around since 1994. So quite a lot of time in the business, and they specialize in the wine cellar side of the business, but they also have an entire cigar humidor business to accompany that, and that comes with a lot of interesting dynamics around how you sell that across different states that they need to manage. And the other really unique thing about vintage makers is that most of the organizations in this industry, they will either focus on manufacturing or they will focus on installation, whereas Vintage Makers does both. And one of the reasons why they do both is the types of jobs that they take on tend to be quite complex, and sometimes they take quite a bit of time. So in one example, it can take 2.5 years from the lead time of, okay, we want to get a project kicked off to the actual construction being delivered. In a lot of cases, it does take 9 to 12 months if we're talking remodels. So these aren't really jobs where you come in, get something done, and then you're out. This is a case where we have to do quite a bit of planning, quite a bit of communications between the client and really present them with what they feel is a really special solution. Because again, we were talking about wine cellars here. It's a fairly niche market. Um, so this is why we recently spoke with Darren, who is the business owner of Vintage Makers, and this is why he said the method is a game changer, and some of the things he highlighted. So I have a few bullets here listed around the different things that you can get into method in terms of the specifications that they can track and the different workflows. But really, to understand what is happening, it, you have to kind of get a sense of the workflow that the field reps and Darren himself goes through. And it's when you go on site to talk to a customer or to a potential customer, and that's whether it's related to the wine cellar or whether it's related to the humidor business, you are talking about something that requires many parts. In the case of the humidor business, you are managing 3,400, over 3,400 SKUs in QuickBooks Enterprise. Those SKUs all have different levels of availability when it comes to inventory and things that are in market, things that are out of market, things that are popular, things that are unpopular. But then when you're actually talking to a customer, they want an actual answer from you. And the faster you can get that answer to them, and the faster you can create a vision of, hey, this is what this will look like for you, the more likely they are to want to do business with you. And that's what Darren and his team are able to accomplish with Method. One of the things, and he pointed out this actually is reflected in the reviews that they get on the company's website, is when their reps show up to customers' door, they're actually able to put together entire proposals, show the client what things will look like, give samples, give actual calculations of cost depending on what different tax jurisdiction they're in, and to actually uh, get to a point where the client can make a real decision on the spot. Whereas most of the competitors, they will talk to the client, that they have to then go back to the office, they have to wait for that information, they have to have a bunch of back and forth with the client. So really what Darren has accomplished here is he has enabled his team with a lot of tools to deliver these unique solutions on the spot for the customer. And I just kind of want to end things here with a quote from Darren that he shared with us. He was on a call. Sorry, as we were on a call with him, Darren was driving, and he said, he's after a service call, and everything he needed for this implementation was available in Method, and the person who was talking to was over in class, and he was like, "What is this?" And he said, "I tell everybody about Method. It's Method. You should check it out." So I really love the story of Vintage Makers because it illustrates the amount of complexity that a business might deal with, and how you can't really go to a solution just off the shelf and implement it, because nobody's really operating the same way that Darren is operating. Nobody has the same list of products. Nobody's managing everything exactly the same way. And so he wants to implement these customizations, which give him a massive edge over the competition. And then I want to throw it over to you, John, to start sharing some of these workflows. But before I dive into that, any thoughts on this story?
No, I think you've laid out a story where it has the uniqueness of a business, and method is matching up to that to deliver, to shorten a sales cycle, to do whatever the case is, having information available to answer questions. And in a nutshell, that's really what we're trying to communicate today, particularly for those that are new to method, that we try to map, or it tries to mirror what you need in your organization. And I think you've laid that out in this testimonial quite well in your summary. And we're going to dig in a little deeper in another way when I begin to share some of my screens.
Yeah, so we'll jump over to what we've all been waiting for here, which is the three workflows from you, John. So I'm gonna stop sharing and throw it over to you to walk us through some of these examples.
Okay.
So just making a presenter now. Let me know if you're.
I think we've got it. Do you see the dashboard of
Yep,
method? Okay, great.
yep, excellent.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, no, go ahead.
Yeah. So just before we jump in, just outline a little bit what I'm gonna show today in some customized screens that I put together for the meeting today, is to really try to demonstrate how you can change method, customize as we call it, to fit your need. And I took one screen just to give you an idea. The way we decided, we're going to show you that in a couple ways, really. One is just with a work order. Most service companies have a work order as a part of their workflow. But even if you don't have a work order, you can tell how we've been able to manipulate it, if you will, customize it to fit different needs. And what we're going to show you is a very basic level of creating a work order. We're going to modify that just a little bit to show you what I'll call a tier two level of that, where it takes the basic and adds some additional um, uh, fields and information that you can have available, and then go to a tier three, which is more advanced. We'll be able to move through them very quickly, and it'll, I believe, give you a great um, a perspective about how you can change things to fit what you want to, what you may need in your business. Whenever you're thinking, though, one other thing I'd like to say before we show a work order is whenever you're thinking about manipulating or customizing, there are two things to keep in mind when we talk about workflow. One is the data that I want to track. What fields of information need to be on there? And the other thing you need to keep in mind is how is it placed on the screen that I'm using? I run into it very often where even two businesses that are in the same industry, but when it gets to, let's say, the work order being viewed, whether it's in the office being created or in the field, that they will want the information in different places and in different order. So another thing that Method does, not only can allow you to customize the screen and the workflow to fit what you want and have the information there, but remember too, the order that that information comes in will be important to you. You may not fully know that on the front end of a Method implementation, but I promise to you, as you work through it, you'll make some of those selections that are unique to your workflow, kind of what Mattis has been sharing with you so far. Mattis, I don't know, I guess if questions are coming in or not, but I assume they know that they can be popping questions in things and into the chat, or whatever place we have a question can be, I think it's questions and chat. So be sure to
Absolutely,
load those up if you've got them, and we can address them as we go through the presentation today.
absolutely.
So I'm going to go into work orders and just show you first. This is a work order list where you can see we already have two work orders here in the list for today. But I'm going to go in first and show you an example of a basic work order. And what I mean by that, and I renamed that kind of tier two, I didn't change it here, tier one. But tier one is what is the minimal that I would have to enter in order to create a work order? Just to give you a baseline of what it takes just to get a work order in the system, and how that can be, we accommodate a very simplistic ordering workflow. You click on the button and it brings you first to just ask, who is the customer I'm dealing with? And I have a site that we do business for called Brooksville. And you can see that it provides for me that this is a company called JSA Enterprises and Brooksville is the company or the site. Here's that site's address, the phone number, and their contact. So I'm just going to grab Brooksville and it will load a screen for us that gives me the required, and I put that up here to try to again to demonstrate to you how simple it can be to put in the name. It defaults to the contact, and I can go tell them whatever the customer story is, right? In this case, of what they need done is needed to be repaired or installed, whatever it is that you have that that you want to put on the work order to communicate to your technician and for reference in the future. You'll notice it has job site and other things provided here as well. And then we have a full host of fields, 6, that we've defaulted items that we know we want to track, but these are the default values that we want in all of these. And it will do that for you so that all I really had to do is choose the customer and enter the instructions. And once I hit save, the work order has been created. So you can see in two selections, verifications of the defaults. I did leave them changed here for you if you wanted to assign it to someone else. You could have that capability, but you can see at a very basic level, we can get a work order entered with really the entry of a pick of a drop down and entry of instructions, work order created. I hope that makes sense. Now, to go a step further, let's just say, well, maybe I want to add a few things to this screen. I like your screen the way it is. I may want to reorganize, as we talked about, some of the order that the screen is done in. But there are a couple other things. I might want to add parts or have a few other bits of information that are available to my dispatcher or whoever's entering work orders. So I'm going to go to what's called the tier 2 screen. This will stay intact, and you'll see a couple of other entries. I'm just going to drop them below. So when I go to tier 2 screen, you can now see that I have what was original, and then a place where I can enter items, such if I wanted to enter a line item here called, we'll just call it, um, pardon me here, I hit that accidentally. We're going to go down here and enter maybe some Freon or something that's from the HVAC world. And so I've now added an item. But while I'm on the phone, I also may want to look at site history of all the work orders that have been done on this site so far. And as Mattis was giving in the other example, maybe there's some equipment or installed cabinetry. It could be anything. What is the current equipment or product on site that I might want to see? And it has a name here as well. And not to mention, if there's internal notes, I want to be able to add and name pictures, and I want to be able to drag in maybe a contract or something associated with this work order. So you can see very easily that you can pull in other bits of information from other tables, some that are created only in methods, some that come from QuickBooks like an item list. And flipping back and forth, you can see here's the basic. And we were very easily able to add additional information, which we call, maybe stepping it up one tier. Are there any questions we might want to address at this point, Mattis, at this time, or just keep going?
Nothing major. I think let's keep going. We do have a
Okay,
couple of questions in the chat, but we'll save them to towards the end.
till the end. Now, the other thing I wanted to also share with you is this was a very slight variation to the basic where we went kind of to an intermediate. But we also have what's called a tier 3 if you have a much more complex, or excuse me, more detailed screen that you would like to have. And you can see now that we have the screen with very similar information, but we've added some things because more is needed in some workflows to create a work order. This was very common to the others you might see with the email and address and job site, but we also have it where they can see the customer balance and the creation date. They have put the order of remember how we talked about the order of things? They have put the order of these fields down the left-hand side and they want to be able to put in a duration of the job. And they also want to put in an arrival window that they've promised the customer. And they have the status and the invoice type that was in there as well. In addition, you have the site history just like you did on the other, but maybe you want to be able to upload work order receipts from the desktop. Maybe you want to be able to add a purchase order and so forth. So there were other drop downs added, other fields added to a more detailed entry for whoever is taking the calls or reading the emails wherever the request for services come. Now it also has the item, just like we added the Freon here, and it has the ability to add pictures. But here in the more detailed workflow, they have the ability to notify a customer or to notify a subcontractor or to notify whoever's assigned to the email. We're going to look at creating an invoice in a minute, but as you can see, it's in one system. You have the ability to accommodate a very basic workflow, one that needs a bit more, or something that's much more detailed as you see here, all in the same platform called Method. And the point I'm sure you can see that's trying to be made here is that you can be anywhere from the basic to the more detailed, or anywhere in between. And we can rearrange these fields to look like you want them to look as a part of that workflow creation. I know one of the questions we saw, if you see over here to the left, it does have the ability to do repetitive maintenance schedules if you wanted to go out as well to set up work orders on a schedule where you go out once a week, once a month, once a quarter. So just keep that in mind. Now that we've looked at the creation of the work order, let's just take a quick moment to go look at what a technician or person in the field might see on their mobile device. Now, I know
And
this is
John,
kind of
as you
small here. Go ahead.
and I just wanted to mention, John, just as you're going through this for the folks in the audience, I would think through the dynamics and the different components in your own business and what matters in terms of relaying different information to different team members, and think through how you would actually want to have things organized. Because I think what's really valuable to see here, John, the thing that you're demonstrating here is that um, you can, again, I love the way you put it, you can go as detailed and as in-depth as possible, or as kind of streamlined and simple as you want on the other side. And it all comes down to what actually fits your team. I think as we were leading up to this webinar and this presentation, the thing we talked about was how a lot of business owners want to have this like level of responsibility. In some cases, they want to give a lot of responsibility to the field reps, and in a lot of cases, they want to say no. I actually only want them to do a very limited amount of things, and everything else will be managed at the office. And I think that's something that gets determined to your specific business. That's not something that a one size fits all solution is going to be able to do for you. So just wanted to
No,
add that
good.
as people keep watching this
No,
example.
great point, and it sets me up very well. Thank you. Um, as Matt was sharing there, in this case, you can see a view from the technician's point of view. This was the work order. I tell you what, I believe we created another one. Give me one moment here. We created views so they can come into their systems. And this isn't my little emulator here is cutting off the window here just a bit. On your mobile device, it'll wrap around and show you the details. But if we go into 402 that we just created, and what you're viewing here, let me go to the tier one or basic work order. You can see that it's just giving them information of what to do, the date and the time, where it's located, contact phone number. We've given a couple of the materials they'll need to complete the job. And again, tells them what they're there to go and do. They've got the ability to add images and look at any attachments that are there. And if they wanted them to do that and that was it, they just wanted to send them, here's your instructions, complete it, pick up the next one when you're done. Or you can have them just mark it as completed, or you could even have a timer that starts and stops. So you can get time records, even if you want that at the basic level. But you can see you can make it very simplistic here. If you want something more complex or give more responsibility, as was mentioned, to your technician in the field, then you can look at a layout that is more of this nature, where there is who the contact is. They can even come in and say, hey, to the customer, I want to text them and tell them I'm going to be there in 10 minutes if they want that kind of communication or if it requires it. Some companies don't have that kind of communication from the tech to the person they're servicing. You can track in route time and start it when they arrive on the job. Put it on hold, mark it as complete. I think you get the gist. If you have to collect a signature, here's your instructions. They can give crew notes back to headquarters that said, this is, what I did. And that can be put on the invoice later or not, or modified if it need be. You can add items, obviously. They can create invoices in the field. They can take credit card. And you can see too, even if your technician requires it and it's beneficial, they can look at the history of the location and the work orders that have all been done prior and actually bring them up and see the detail. So again, we can be as detailed and thorough and transfer much of the workflow to the technician if that's where you want that to live, or you can minimize it and just have the technician do the minimum required, give you the feedback, go to the next work order, and off they go. Anything, Mattis, you'd like to add to that that I might have left out?
No, I think it's a really good illustration of the degree of control again that you can assign out to your team, or maybe it's just to select people on your team, and then you want less responsibility or less control for others. I just think it's a perfect illustration of how you can do this with method. And the thing that it goes back to is you have to think through about your business and what makes sense for your business, what makes sense for the dynamics on your team, and the types of jobs that you do as well. If we think back to the story about vintage makers, right? The people who are in the field, dealing with humidors or wine cellars, they probably need to have a pretty solid understanding of the different materials and the different systems that can be implemented if you want them to pull all of that up and create custom solutions on the spot for a potential customer. But if somebody doesn't have that degree of understanding, perhaps they should be limited into just executing a set thing that is written down for them, and they can't really do too many changes. The beauty of all of this, though, is that if you can design it, and then you can implement it with method.
Yep. And I think it gets back to what that use the word contort or making do with workarounds. That's not a word I've had to use with method. Um, it's not a blank check. I'm sure there's some businesses that we haven't been able to do everything, so we don't want to misrepresent in that way. But I have worked with systems where I had workarounds a lot, and it's that frustration with systems that you begin to outgrow, and then you need to change your system and change your system. And I've run into people who've been in between two and three systems, so you don't know, as they're thinking about what's present today, and you've made a great point to have them go down that road, Mattis. But also, there are changes in the future they don't know about yet that may change because of a big customer they bring on, or the industry requires something, or the state requires something. The great thing about method is you don't have to wait for the developer to come out with something to maybe fit your change if they'll do it at all. Sometimes the change is only in one state, it's not nationwide. So, are they going to make a change that everybody has to use that's only for one state, if you will? And so, method can put you a bit at ease and have a longer runway of use, particularly as you may encounter changes in the future too. So, um, it really does get back to thinking of workflow as you put. Don't think as much CRM as you think workflow.
Yeah. And I love you also bringing up the piece around some changing regulations. Again, I was just at a call, luckily, with somebody in the field service space who was mentioning that they have certain reporting requirements on commercial vehicles, and they've actually built out that tracking in method and have
There you
actively
go.
been actually stopped by somebody and asked to show their inspection and reporting requirements, and he showed it in a method, and the person said, "Wow, this meets every single
Yeah.
thing." Because again, it's
Yeah,
something that they were just able to build into their business workflow because it was a requirement for their specific setup. So um,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I
And
think we
sometimes
have.
you don't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off, John.
Well, I was just going to say sometimes you don't know what you don't know yet about how this works, and there are also other things that once you begin using the system and understanding how it interfaces with QuickBooks and other things, you find newer areas that you can begin to um, manage in a different way vis-a-vis Methods platform.
Yeah, exactly. As your business grows, you evolve and your needs evolve.
Sure, sure. Well, I was going to move to creating an invoice if you want to do that next, unless there are some questions or something
I
else
think
you'd like
so.
to do with.
I think let's take a look at the invoice workflow quickly, and then we'll move on to the question and answer period, which I think folks are waiting for.
Sounds good. So again, with invoicing, another area which has variation depending on industry, even people within an industry do so differently. To give you the basics of invoicing, once the work order is completed and shows up in the completion list, who's ever in charge of creating the invoice would then come in, review the invoice for the things or review the work order for the things they want to make sure are present, and then just simply come to the bottom of the invoice or the work order and hit create invoice. And in this particular workflow that I have, it's going to ask a couple of questions like are there any attachments perhaps, if we still have the same routine prompted here. So you're going to see some things in between. And as we demonstrated with the work order, you can keep invoice creation very simple and just say, hey, here's a list of 10 completed work orders, make invoices out of them all. I don't need to review any of it. Or you can come in one by one, like we're about to do, just so we can demonstrate the features. Come to the work order that you know has been completed, um, has the information that you need, and hit create invoice. And when I hit create invoice, it says the work order has successfully saved. That's just a pattern it goes through. It prompts me for a couple of things, such as the invoice date. The system gives you the ability to hold an invoice for maybe another review by someone else by waiting before it syncs to QuickBooks, which is what I'm going to do. And then I can say create the invoice. And it says, are you sure you want to create an invoice for the work orders? Again, just some screens. Would you like to include checked attachments? Some people have attachments they want on the invoice. Some people don't, so we can eliminate that or continue with it as we have here. I'm going to say no, we didn't have any attachments. And then it created can you see, Matt, it's the JSA Brooksville ending in 539 for $19.
Yep, yep, that's visible.
We're going to go into that invoice, and this invoice was created from that work order. And if you'll see, it's got the two items. Notice that it also brought in the description, excuse me, from the technician. If you recall, we put in this is what I did on the work order. It brought in the Freon that was added. And this is kind of a customization as well. If you don't want anything from the field to show up on the invoice, you don't have to have it. And you can also come in and edit it if you want to, so that it better fits with what you're billing, right? Notice here there's internal memos and so forth, but once this is all done, then at this point, you simply save the invoice and it's been created. Um, we have the ability to email and send it out. They can go to the customer, they got a link, they can come in through the portal, You can show them whatever you want to show them in the portal. They can even process a credit card through your portal if you want to have that done, or if that is your workflow, or if you just email it to them and they send in a check, whatever, again, matches with your workflow. But very, very simple from moving to the work order to the invoice. And if I could just add one other thing, if Matt, you can see over here all the way to the right where it says work order number one or
Yes.
one.
Yep.
One of the great things about Method is that while I'm looking at the invoice, I can also view the work order, customer story, what's need to be repaired. You may recall this is just in a very what we call a ribbon on the side. So if I needed to go and check anything on the work order while I'm finalizing the invoice, I can still look back to it as a reference. Very powerful. Not a lot of systems can do that, particularly at time of invoicing. We can print the invoice, of course, just to take it all the way through. If you wanted to print it, there are standard versions or templates that are out there. But as you might imagine, these templates can all be customized. I've had people do some crazy things with their invoices and rates and what have you. Some don't want to show quantity, some only want to show quantity and a price. It's just a matter of what it is that you and how you would like to show it. Anything else you'd like to see, Mattis, on invoice creation? It's pretty straightforward.
I think you've just about covered everything that we wanted to go through. I think the thing that I would stress for the folks watching is, again, going back to that concept of a workflow, nothing really that you're walking through here, John, is isolated. Like it's its own thing. We just think of an invoice as an invoice. It's not that. It's something that is connected back to the work order. It's connected to your customer through a customer portal. It's connected back into QuickBooks. In other words, it serves a function, and there are certain steps that you want to take with it. And again, not to sort of beat the same drum over and over again, but that those steps are going to be unique to your business. And
Right.
you're going to want to have a setup that will accommodate you the way that you've been doing things. And I think that's the beauty of what you're showing us now. So
Yeah.
really appreciate that overview, John. I do want to jump to the Q&A section. So I'm going to switch screens here. Give me a second.
Sure.
So I think we actually can just stay without the screen share for this next little bit, and we'll jump over into the question side. And I'll tackle the questions that came in live in just a moment. But I think the first thing that I really want to address is we had this question submitted ahead of time around what are the different things that integrate back into QuickBooks? What actually syncs? What doesn't sync? How do you control what syncs? And I think to answer it in short, uh, effectively everything can sync back to QuickBooks. I think by default, there's kind of a bi-directional relationship that is happening between your QuickBooks account and Method. And I should stress that is QuickBooks, regardless of what you're talking about, online, desktop, or whatever version you have. Um, but then I think there are select cases where there's a degree of control that you can have. John, you were walking through an example where you prevented, I believe it was the invoice from syncing to
Correct.
QuickBooks right away because you want to go through some sort of like an approval workflow. So those controls are available to answer that question. Have you had any unique setups when it comes to the sync in your experience, John?
Yeah, not a ton of things, and your your assessment of most everything does. So when you think of QuickBooks, sales orders, estimates, invoices, they are all bi-directional. However, work orders only live in Method. So that is one thing because QuickBooks doesn't have a work order app, module, or feature. You can rename the sales order form a work order, and it kind of can emulate that. But the work order itself, as we have it here in Method, does not go to QuickBooks. Another thing that's kind of kept separate too, unless you go to some customizations, is payroll data. Um, GL accounts and data and balances and that kind of thing can be kept hidden, if you will, because most of the time people want accounting folks in QuickBooks, and what Method does is free up the rest of their organization to live in Method and only see maybe parts of accounting data that they need to do their job, but they're not given a full reign to just go in and search GL accounts and GL entries and run P&Ls and that kind of thing. So that kind of stuff with payroll typically lives in, um, obviously lives in your accounting, and you let the other things, the other parts of the business and responsibilities and method is how most people approach it.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to get through some of the questions that we had come in live, and we do have quite a few. So one of these was from Wyatt. Thank you so much for submitting. And Wyatt is interested in best practices for taking the residential services workflows from cold lead lists to scheduling follow-up services and then every stage in between. So I think the idea is that there's a sales component to this, and an office, and then a field service component. And I believe that what you're looking to have everybody manage kind of their own part of that workflow. So sales reaching out to leads, I think maybe office doing some of the scheduling, and then the field crew actually implementing the jobs. John, is that a familiar workflow for you in Method? Is that something you've implemented before? I know off the top of my head that is something that you can definitely do, and you can customize who sees what and who's responsible for what. But off the top of my head, I don't have examples. Wondering if anything comes to mind here for you.
Yeah, actually, there's two scenarios where that can be. There's one where you have a sales team, if you will, that's signing up new projects, let's say new jobs. And so they're following up, calling, presenting estimates, and all that's getting stored in the customer's account on the front end. Then once the job is closed or the estimate is assigned, that estimate can then turn into a work order. And then you can send out the team necessary to, do the work. There is another scenario where you get into recurring maintenance, like you would in, say, an HVAC company that maybe everyone's experienced, where they will say to you, hey, we have a preventive maintenance that we do twice a year. So the technician, while they're there on that call, I've had some a customer in particular that will let the technician sign the person up for that recurring schedule of service. And sometimes it's twice a year, sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's quarterly, depending on, again, the business and the market. And then they will, the data that's needed to set up the contract that manages that recurring visit is collected so that the office can then credit them the first call to their contract for the reason that they were out there that day, and also set up for the following visits based on when it starts and what needs to be done next. Um, so those are two scenarios that follow kind of a sales recurring. The first one didn't follow a recurring one. It was more of a sales example where we're doing business, sign a contract, and then need a work order to go do the work. The second one was more of a maintenance, and I heard the word residential is typically where that recurring visit happens is with residential customers, although there are preventive maintenance with industrial and commercial. So I don't want to rule that out, but I did hear residential where I do see that more frequently.
Okay.
I hope that
Really
answered the
appreciate the insight
question,
there, John.
but it's something that can be managed for sure.
Yeah, and I would encourage Wyatt to reach out to Method for more questions. Reach out to John. We're gonna add some information towards the end if you guys want additional information. I do want to get through some of these other questions. We do have a lot that we
Okay.
especially got ahead of the webinar. So just walking through some of this quite quickly. When it comes to this is from Shannon. When it comes to things like user permissions and maintaining privacy of sensitive accounting data, things like job costing, we already talked about selective syncing and then subcontractor access. I think this is all kind of related. If you have a lot of different people that you want to plug into Method, can you control the sensitive data that appears to these individuals. Maybe I want subcontractors in my system, but I don't want them to make changes to my QuickBooks through Method. And sort of how am I going to manage that? What's going to be the source of truth there? John, I believe this is pretty common with Method, especially with subcontractors. This is one of the reasons why people actually come to Method is if you want to manage some of this with subcontractors without necessarily having them on a payroll solution within QuickBooks. Method has kind of a cleaner way to integrate it.
Yeah, and it's very granular in its ability to keep people in and out of modules. And here's another great thing is there have been customers that I even set up a subsequent um, option. We call it a permissions app where you can go in there and design specific permissions. To give you an example, I had one customer that wanted to lock everyone out of the system at 5:30 every day. So we went in and created a permissions app, and everyone that cannot get into the system after 5:30, is not allowed. And that's not a standard permissions, even though they're very good within Method. But you can go to a greater extent to design even an additional layer of permissions with the permission apps that I just mentioned to you. So it's very good about that um, in taking care of whatever you need for your company.
Thank you, John. That's a fascinating example. And just having been in this space for a while in the QBO ecosystem and worked with apps, the idea that you could have such a degree of custom permission where you lock somebody out on a time-based window is I haven't heard of that before. Actually, I'm learning about this about method in
Yeah,
this webinar. So
yeah, yeah.
that's fascinating to hear. Um, okay, so jumping through some of the other questions here, um, Brandon submitted a question around how do you handle large detailed projects that have several stage payments and milestones? Can Method manage periodic maintenance tasks and warranty repairs? So I think you already mentioned the maintenance and warranty piece. Yes, you can have kind of scheduling there built in. And when we're talking about milestones, is that something that you've had experience setting up before? If you have
Yeah, I
multi-stage
have, and
projects?
yeah, it is an add. It is an add-on, and depending on how sophisticated you need, so we probably dig a little deeper because sometimes you get into where I just want to bill a certain percentage. Let's take the easy way. You can have milestones. You can say, "Hey, I'm going to take it in 4 billing milestones or draws or whatever you might call it," and you can even preset that up. As when we get to stage one, I can bill of a $100,000 job. I can bill them equally 25, 25, 25, 25 usually doesn't work that way, but you can set up as many stages or then bill whichever percentage you want at each stage. And then it'll keep track of what was the initial amount and of course how much have I billed to date. So you know what it's just very simplistic. Now, most people do want a little more than that, but at a base level, you can get it very easily, and then we'd have to dig into how much more or because I have worked with contractors and GCs where they can only bill, they can only bill what they have worked. So it's a percentage of what has been worked they can bill, once a month or whatever. So we would dig deeper, but yes, we can do some things in that arena for folks.
Okay, amazing. Um, so I do have a couple of questions. I want to be conscious of time, make sure that we get through everything that we want to get through. Dan, ahead of time, submitted a question around item barcode images, UPC into sales transactions. I think this is something that we briefly touched on before the webinar, John.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is something that actually, uh, I don't know if I've had experience with it or come across experience with setting up item barcode images in sales transactions. Does this sound familiar at all?
Well, it does, but Method has what I was checking to see if a tech could be out on the field and barcode could be on an item. He barcodes it and it puts it in the search field and finds it in his list. That we cannot do. I did confirm. But as far as on a sales order and barcoding and what have you, there are some things that QuickBooks does that stores barcode. So I'm a little confused about the question. Do we simply just want to have an image with a barcode, or do we want to actually be able to scan it and read it into the system? I would imagine that's what they want, but maybe not. So do you have any, am I misunderstanding, Mattis? Can you give me more clarity there? Or?
I'm not exactly sure, Dan, and I believe you're actually on the webinar, Dan. Good to see you. And I see you have another question submitted too. So if you could send us a follow-up on the specific use case for barcodes, maybe we can help clarify there after the webinar. And I also saw, Dan, you wanted to know what are the kind of distinctions between Method and some of the other players like Jobber, House Call Pro. John, I think you've had experience of people trying different solutions and then eventually coming to you and saying, this is not working for me, I need something else, and then method ends up being the thing that works for them. What are kind of the tipping points there?
Well, I have an example now of someone who just came from Jobber. Jobber's been out there, great reputation, and for certain things, it has proven to be a fine solution for folks. However, with this particular company, they were had too many contortions and the way they wanted to do things, and so particularly one of being able to communicate a work order to a subcontractor. I didn't show that to folks, but Method can put a subcontractor and zip them a work order. And that was one of the things that Jobber could not do, and I think you won't find anybody can do. But Method allowed us to make that change and the ability to. I had a button at the bottom, I think, that said we were able to send it to a subcontractor. So that is one of the things that many don't do. I think the overall, and try to make this quick, is that those programs are designed by people with particular workflows in mind. And they go, based on our experience, this is what most people will probably want to do. And so they design it that way. And one of the things that matters in the very beginning pointed out is concentrating on workflows. Everybody does not do it the same way. And just like I was showing to you with the work orders, you get into a situation where either not all the data is on there you need, it's not in the order that you want, it's confusing people, or the dispatcher can see it, the tech can't, because that was the way they thought it ought to be done. And that, when you back away, yeah, it's feature related, but think about an even bigger picture in, do I have a system that's going to be able to, what system's going to live with me the longest? To change service systems, if there's any out there that have tried many, it's a painful thing to do. So anytime you go down a line where there's only one, somebody has designed their way of doing it, more than likely you're going to run into the wall of that. And sometimes it's going to be so abrasive that you're going to want to get rid of it and move to another. The problem with that is, what is the next system that you find going to be limited in? Yeah, it does the feature you didn't have in Java or the other, but then you go to the next one. Oh, it had that feature, but it's lacking some of the things you had in Java. Method, that's the problem, and that's the advantage of Method, is that we more than likely can give you the feature in Java and the new one that you need. I hope that makes sense, but that's the quickest answer of what I think is the difference. The ability to design your own workflow and make it real on a system that helps manage your organization.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. We are coming up to time and we still have unanswered questions. We had some really deep ones submitted also from Shannon. Thank you, Shannon. Talking about a B2B painting contractor and longer timelines. I just want to be conscious and respectful of everybody's time. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those questions and follow up with you. And John, I think some of them are going to be addressed directly to you. So I'll share those
Well,
after. In the meantime, I do want to say if you have additional questions or you want to learn more about Method, you guys are more than welcome to reach out to John or ourselves. You can reach John at johnsandyandassociates.com and reach out with the specific questions around any of these more in-depth workflows. And likewise, if you're thinking about trying Method, you can sign up for a trial, 14-day trial at method.me. Or if you actually want to talk to somebody, you can also book some time with our sales team and they can have a more individual consultation with you on any of these types of questions. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining and staying with us through this webinar. Thank you so much, John, for devoting your time and showing us these in-depth workflows. I feel like I learned a lot from this
Yeah,
webinar,
well,
just
good.
just seeing
Yeah,
the walkthroughs. Yeah,
good deal. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It was a lot of fun. And you let me know if you need, if we can do it again sometime.
absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Take care.
All right, take care.